from just a cynical point of view.
Be cynical, right.
But I think, you know, oftentimes we do have people making studies, and I think Congress represents an excellent example of that. Any of our legislative bodies or our educational institutions as well. They'll do a study, but for the most part, after the study has been done, most of that information is simply laid on the shelf. How will Nashville's agenda, Ms. Hunter, prevent that from happening? That is, if you've done all of this work and you've collected all of this information, what is the next step beyond that to make sure that that there's a possibility for the implementation of some of these ideas?
Well, what Cynthia ended with was that as the goals are developed and looked at, we, in the groups, in the meetings, we'll determine what needs to be, you know, what can be accomplished right away, what needs to have some long-term perspective. From this process and from what we've heard in other cities, first of all, I wouldn't categorize it with a congressional study.
Okay.
I like calling it a process because it has a lot of movement to it.
A lot of people involved.
A lot of people involved, and so I would not call it a study, but it is a process that has a life of its own by now. You see, even at those first round of meetings, neighbors were meeting, and people with like interests were meeting and saying, you know, let me tell you further my ideas. I participated and I facilitated, and so I've been in more than one meeting. And what I met neighbors in the Madison community that I didn't know. I heard what they were interested in, and I know what I'm interested in, and so we talked along those lines. So what will happen officially or structurally, what might happen is groups may form in other cities where this has happened. There may be interest groups formed, and different goals may take on lives of their own. There may be some things that the government needs to participate in, that the chamber needs to participate in, that state funding may be required for. There will be I would say that there will probably be a lot of different kinds of formats coming out of that goal-setting process. There may be some things that can happen immediately. There may be some that can happen over the next decade. But people, based on their level of interest and level of involvement, can at that point help make things happen for Nashville.
Ms. Morin, in pulling this information together so far in all of these meetings and topics that you've discussed, have you had any information dealing with the Centennial Mall and the arena? I mean, what are some of the printouts and the readouts that you get in reference to that? I mean, what are some of our attitudes about these things?
Actually, we've had some funny kinds of comments. We've had everything from the arena's wonderful to a woman who called up and said, we don't need the money for arena, we need to clean up my neighborhood. Only the men are going to go to that arena. So we've had both ends of it. Generally, there's a lot of support for the movement in the city today, Dr. Haney. There are some people who are concerned about our priorities in spending dollars. That has been raised. I think there's also a real commitment. I'm surprised not surprised. I am pleased with the depth of understanding that people brought to these meetings, just as Brenda said. These are people who care about what happens in their community. Let me add on to something about implementation that Brenda pointed out, and I think needs emphasis for your audience.
Yes.
I think we have to stop waiting for somebody else to do things for us. When we are setting the goals, we Nashvillians are setting the goals, and we've had longtime residents. We have a man who comes in and works with us who's only been here a few months, but he loves the city already and wants to work here. I'll work on the project. We love our city, but we can't wait for somebody else to do it. If it's going to happen, it has to start with us, and it started with us with the goal-setting process, and now, as Brenda said, we're going to look at this and say, maybe my church will take on this piece. Very good, a very good story. We brought in the leadership, some people from the international community. They are our new residents. That piece of our community is growing. And we sat down, some people around a table, and we realized we had one section of the international community that had come here to teach, to be on college faculties, to start a life here. They had come here by choice and had settled in and become nice middle-class citizens, wonderful people who have contributed to the city. We had some other people from one of the churches who were dealing with our very newest residents, who have to learn how to turn on a stove or how to flush a toilet or whatever, and that they've never lived in a really civilized society. Well, in the middle of the meeting, the professional group looked at the other and said, wait a minute, we can help you. You've got problems getting driver's license. Our people will go with you. We've been through it. We'll do it. We don't have to do anything else.
So there's a sense of cooperation of
That's
people
beginning
who
to develop.
seem to come out and become a part. We've got about 3 minutes before we end today for some final comments in reference to this. But what are some of the things that you think the two of you think our audience ought to know about over the next 2 minutes that we have? A minute for you, Ms. Hunter, and of course a minute for you, Ms. Morin. Give us some things that perhaps would sort of leave people with an impression of the significance and the importance of what we're doing here.
Well, I'd like to use my minute saying this. I've been working in the community for the past year doing leadership and team building and talking about the demographics, that is, the changing populations that will take place. So what I would do is encourage people to use Nashville's agenda as you would any valuable resource. It's as valuable as money toward your future. And to use this process, no matter what you think about it, if it's for the city that you're going to live in, probably the rest of your life, and your children and grandchildren, use this opportunity and get involved.
Very good. Ms. Morin, as the Executive Director for Nashville's agenda, final comments.
I want to invite your audience to be part of us. We have a phone number, 321-0300. We have an office on 25th in Charlotte. Brenda's already given them the invitation to join us. We would like you to come to these meetings, where they'll be very heavily publicized. If you're concerned about your children, if you're concerned about your city, if you're concerned about your neighborhood, come to these meetings. Help us write the goals for Nashville. We're not going to do it by ourselves. We need everybody to join us and be part of it, and we'd like your audience to join us, Dr. Haney.
Very good. Let me thank the two of you for coming by and giving us that excellent information this morning about Nashville's agenda. And I think our audience should have a better idea as to what this project is all about. I know I've got a better idea, and I certainly appreciate the two of you coming by and giving us that information. And let me encourage you to tune in again next week for another informative edition of Comments. Thank you and good morning.